If you are
Jamal O'Gwyn delivers.
Johnson, and all he can do is turn and watch that one land in the palm tree.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in. Thank you for stopping by. This is your host, Jamal O'Gwyn. Starting today, we're going to start doing a podcast once a week called Beyond the Jersey. The reason for this, biggest thing, motivate, educate, and relate. I know a lot of people play sports growing up. Most importantly, we have a lot of stuff going on, right? And I think that nowadays we can get tricked by social media, and life can seem perfect. But the biggest reason for this is to relate, right? We all have things going on. We all have pressures. We all have families. We all have responsibilities. And life does get tough. And I think that social media can't hide that. So that's my main purpose for this, is just to show, right? We all go through stuff regardless of what social media shows. Special guest today, super special guest. First one, I'm super excited. I got Scott Handling with me today. Scott was my role model growing up, done a lot for me, supported me, and I couldn't be where I am today without him. So I appreciate you hopping on.
Well, I appreciate that, Jamal, and it's such a high honor to be your guest here, your first guest. Definitely. And we go way back, and I'm just proud to be in the seat and proud to be in front of you.
Definitely, I appreciate it. We'll hop straight into it. So
yeah,
right, obviously, like I said, relate. Obviously, with you, right, I know you're not where you want to be in 10 years, but obviously you're in a really good position. Do well for yourself, very successful, both in the real estate world, at home as a father, husband, kid, right? So kind of just tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what that looked like.
Yeah, so I'd say pretty much a middle-class kid in the middle. My parents were both teachers. I saw my parents go to work, and they actually kept their W-2. Their first teaching position, they made $13,000 or $14,000 annually. So I saw my parents work their way up through the education system. Mm-hmm. They eventually did 30-plus years at Fresno Unified, devoted their life for me and my brother. And so I'd say a middle-class kid. I was very athletic. Sports was everything growing up. So I felt that gave me such a great foundation. And, from there, stopped growing because, I'm half Japanese. So then I realized I got to use my mind and do business and transition it that way.
100%.
But I'd say normal childhood. I'm very fortunate to have the parents I did have, which gave me a lot of love and support. And they told me I could be, anything I wanted to be, and gave me that liberty to do so.
Definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, no, I think that, like I said, it's very easy to get fooled by the cameras, right? I know your parents personally, both great people, great parents. So you definitely were lucky enough to grow up, obviously married household with, two loving and supporting parents. So, so before real estate, what'd you do, right? Server?
Yeah.
Kind of hustled, kind of.
Yeah. I've always been an entrepreneur. So my first job actually was a paper boy at the age of 12.
Okay.
And now I think you have to be 16, 18, something like that. But actually back then you had to be 12 years old. And so I delivered every day. And I remember Sundays was always the day I dreaded because it's the biggest day of the papers, all the coupons.
Yep.
And so that was something I would do every day. And back then, rollerblades were cool. Yeah. So I would do rollerblading. I'd have a pouch on the front and the back, and have a reflective thing that said the B. And so I delivered that was next on my pet food journey, but I delivered papers every day, and you didn't get a day off. So I learned work ethic through that I couldn't take a day off. And I was earning money as a young kid early on. And the thing was tough, though, for me at first, and we'll get back to that, was we would have to collect for the B, meaning if they didn't pay by mail, you had to go knock on the door and collect the payment. And that was hard because I wasn't developed as an extroverted kid at that point.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, so paperboy, and then went into, and then I got a job at a Japanese fast food restaurant. They're still around today here in Fresno, California, different owners. But I worked there for about 4.5 years, and I learned customer service skills. A Japanese family took me in at that time. Mm-hmm. And I remember I had a job before the age of 16. I think it was 15 and a half. And at that time, you could get a work permit, but they would pay you 90% of minimum wage. And you could look it up. Back then, I think it was 1994 or 5. minimum wage was about $4.15 or $4.25, and 90% of that. So I was getting less than $4 an hour. So, but instilled with Paperboy, and then going working for a Japanese restaurant, really instilled work ethic and value in a dollar. Like I know just because my parents were teachers and stuff, I earned everything I had because
100%.
they've mom lived very frugally, and I never just no silver spoon over here. I had to me and my
100%.
brother always had to try to earn it.
Had to, right?
Yeah.
I think that's big too, because I think nowadays you'll see a lot, right? It's tricky because I think as parents, you always want your kids to have better.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to translate, that meaning when you're constantly working. You don't really get to spend too much time with the kids because you see how, say, you grow up poor, right? You saw how you grew up, so it's work. So you kind of like the only way to kind of justify it is like, well, if he wants an iPad, I'll give him an iPad. If he wants a PlayStation, I'll give him a PlayStation.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it hard too, and it's the translation part. I think that because obviously everything reverts back to the parents, right? And I don't think that they're bad parents. I just think that they want better for their kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's something right now that we struggle with, even just as a society, is, well, they're not good parents because they just give their kids everything. But it's like, well, do you know how they grew up, right? Everyone judges they judge the final decision, but no one knows what the choices were.
Right.
So definitely. But so kind of going off that, right? So I've been lucky enough to see the business grow, right? I remember small office, right? Transition to a bigger one, and now we're here. What does that kind of mean to you? And like I said, I know you're not where you want to be in 10 years from now, but what does it mean to you to see yourself here, have the group you have, kind of reflecting on, right? Like making $3 an hour to where you are now. Like, what does that mean to you? Do you ever have times where you kind of not necessarily reminisce, but reflect, where you're like, man, like, I'm doing what I always wanted to?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Kanye West says it best. Sometimes people get the flower. Sometimes we get the flowers when we can't still smell them. And there just been little moments. I don't feel I've arrived. I feel I have a lot of work to do. I feel like I'm in the right direction. My trajectory's in the right direction. My mindset's in the right direction. I'm very fortunate to have a supporting family and colleagues and friends. So that's an interesting question. Yes, I've looked back, but just at moments, like the grand opening of this office was a moment, or even prior to that in our other office. I remember, because for so long the office would be ghost town, but just looking up and seeing every single cubicle rocking, people hitting the copy machines, throwing stuff in the shredder. I mean, then I looked up, I said, I got a real business. And that felt good because, for the longest time, I just was trying to make my business something and brand my name and have the confidence to go out there and know that I could provide good value to agents and loan officers. So it's a good question. I think I should celebrate a little bit more or reflect a little bit more. I don't know if it's maybe I just don't look back and I'm just always continuing to march on. One pivotal moment I do want to reflect on was when I was at the Japanese restaurant. I identified I was trading hours for dollars. So there's no incentive. So at that point, I realized, you know what? I'm going to take these same skills and I transitioned them over to being a waiter and what we would call a server. So I opened up the Marie Callender's over there on Blackstone, in which now they're no longer here. But I opened up that store 226. And, but at that, I realized something. I realized that you could get paid for your effort and there was 100%. No cap on that. And that was a powerful revelation. So I'm like, okay, if I could turn tables faster than the next person, and if I could, do customer service, get better tips than the next person, and I could make 150, 200 a night by doing that, then that's where I transitioned over to throughout college as being a waiter, because I realized not only would I get hourly, but it was incentive based. We're competitive people. So we know, like, we're going to raise, cream rise to the top. I became a lead server. And so I took it as far as I could with that route. But I realized incentive-based, work is a vehicle. It's a vehicle, and then that's where it kind of opened my mind up with business, and then reading books like Rich Dad Poor Dad and understanding what passive income is and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, opened up my eyes that I could work a little bit smarter than harder.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you definitely touched on it too. I think the biggest thing is mindset.
Yeah.
Even kind of going back. So I know you said it's hard to kind of reflect because you're always moving forward, and I think that's something that as a human who has, right, I think when you're trying to be at the top, every goal you have is unrealistic, right?
Mhm.
Everything is above and beyond. People are going to look at you like, this dude's silly, right? And I think that's something too, even throughout my baseball career. It's hard to really sit back because you constantly get the praise. Man, Scott's awesome. Like, I see you driving this car, you live here, you do that. But it's hard to reflect, right? And I think it's the constant compliments people give you, but it's because like you're never satisfied. And I think that's something for me too. I always struggled with. I never felt like I was doing good enough, even if I was the best. And I think something I've realized as I've gotten older is like,
wow, that's interesting, because you reached one of the highest levels you possibly can make.
Yeah.
And you still felt like that at times.
It's hard because it's like Kobe says, right? Like that interview where it's like, man, you guys are up 3-0. He's like, job's not finished.
Yeah.
Well, it's like job's not finished. And I think now, I'd say having a kid was probably the biggest moment where I was like, you know what? Sometimes you kind of just have to sit there and be like, hey, like you're doing a good job, right?
Mhm.
It could be worse. And I think that's something that that transition from baseball to the real world, it's tricky, right? I think post sports depression is real. Not that I was like, gonna go off the edge or anything, but it's when you do something for 20 so odd years, and then it's like, boom, one day you're like, you know what, man, I'm good, I'm done. And it's just like, whoa, like what's next? And I think that's the biggest question you get is like, well, what's next? I think it's just mindset, right?
Yeah,
I think it's all mindset and how you go about it. And I think that's what really dictates the direction you go in, right? You can fall off the edge, or you can go make something better out of the situation you were in,
Right.
for sure. So you kind of touched on it too, support, right? So what the value of having a supportive partner, right? I've known Daisy, since you guys first met, she used to come over to the house,
Yeah.
taco night, all that fun stuff, right?
Yeah. Miss those.
So, so seeing where your business is now, right? Like, how much of that if you didn't have a supportive partner like Daisy, do you feel like you'd be in the position you are today?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
And that's why I did marry her. And that was
Mhm.
one of the traits I did see in her is you have to look at something. Is this person adding to my life or taking away?
100%.
And, ever since she got involved with everything, she was just an enormous addition. And
Mhm.
we talked about mindset and having the support system. That's where I'm strongest, because I know she's strong on the back end.
Mhm.
And she's got a lot right now. We're in the heap of it right now. We have 3 children. She does remotely work on the business as well. But it was the game changer for me, because
Mhm.
one thing she did give me a promise was, before we got married, and I told her this, is number one, don't ever try to talk me out of my dreams. And like we just talked about right now, I
Mhm.
still feel like I got a long way to go. I can't just wait to
For
see
sure.
where we're at in 10 years, scaling multiple states and, doing our thing. So I told her, number one, don't ever try to talk me out of my dreams. And, don't ever. And so there's been tough times with the business and
Mhm.
such where, she might have wanted to, hey, let's wrap it up. Why don't you go apply at a banking position, or go work for Wells Fargo, go work corporate, or go do that. She never told me that once. And there
Mhm.
have been some up and down times. We started in 2008. It was a tough time at that
100%.
point. And, she was just in it, and just having the emotional support to me means a lot. She doesn't ever tell me, when are you coming home, because she knows I'm not out messing around. I'm not at the
Yeah.
bars. I'm not out, doing anything else but trying to provide for my family. So yeah, that's been a game changer to
Mhm.
have that support to, let me grind.
Yep.
I also feel like I do have some sort of guilt too, knowing that she does support me out there and I'm out there. So, you know, it's a tough one.
No,
you know.
100%. I agree with that too, because I feel like obviously I'm newer to this, right? You know, even having the wifey too, she's awesome, man. She's awesome.
Yeah.
She's great. You know, she has to take a lot of the crap into the stick. You know, I'm always gone. I'm always doing this, and I feel like it's definitely tricky too, because she has her own business. She does great. And you know, she's trying to grow too, and I think that's something that you know, for me, when I wake up every day, you know, I look in the mirror and I'm like, you know, 'cause a lot of people, everyone talks about sleep, right? And even she's big on like, bro, like you need a day sometimes, and it's like I can't. I don't have that in me. I wasn't raised that way. I didn't grow up a rich kid, right? I mean, you know it. Like, we had to fight. We were never without, but we didn't have anything extra. So I don't have that like day off in me, you know. And I think for her, just what she does to support it, you know, she's trying to grow too, but she's like, you know what? If I got to stay home with the baby, and I'll still work and do that, but you got to go do your thing. And, you know, I think it's something that drives me every day, you know. And
That's awesome.
you know, someone asked me the other day, they're like, man, you don't like, my brother's like, you don't like sleep or what? And I'm like, I do, but like, I love the wife and my kid more.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's something that every day before I leave, it's like, you know what, man, like, yes, I'm tired. For sure I'm tired, right? Got 5-month-old, he, you know, but at the same time, I love them more than I love sleep. You know, I always say sleep is for the rich, you know, and I feel like once you're there, then I could sleep. You know, once I'm content with what's going on, you could sleep. So I definitely think that if I didn't have her, I'd be in a complete different position.
Yeah.
Even-
and that's your why. So
Yeah.
that's where, when we're tired, we're able to push through. When we don't feel like we are showing up, we're able to push through because our why is ingrained in us so deep that, you know, we have a duty
Yes.
to protect, provide, and to go out and ultimately, you know, take care of our family.
100%, 100%. It's crazy. It's crazy once you have, you know, the real whys. And that's what I told her. Even during baseball, I really think that, you know, I got to a point where I was just like, it wasn't fun. You know, it wasn't fun. And it was like, it was a struggle. It was just like, dang, do I really love this? Am I just doing it because it's all I know? And I think that had she not came at the time she did, you know, at that time we had met 2021, just had Tommy John surgery, constant injuries, I was just like, dude, I'm tired. Like, I'm tired. You know, like,
And this
I'm
is
tired.
before you went out to Florida?
This before I went to Arizona, before I even
Okay.
signed to play pro ball. So this is as soon as I started, you know, and it's just like, man, like, I'm not a person that gives up, but it's like, man, like, you know, I'm tired. You know,
Yeah.
my body's tired. Mentally, I'm tired. But my dad always told me, right, mind over matter. And that's something that I grew up on. It was like, you know what, mind over matter, mind over matter. But there definitely is a point in time where it's like, I don't like, you know what I mean? There's a point in time where you get tired.
Yeah.
And I think even having her during that time was like, you know what, it kind of was that the batteries were dead and it kind of juiced up a little bit. And it's like, okay, well, what's the worst that happens? And, you know, she told me that and I was like, cool. You know what?
Yeah.
That's, you know what? That was kind of what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just something, such a small phrase, probably not much meaning in it either, but it was just like, you
there's
know,
a
what's
ton
the
of
worst, you know, what's the worst that happens if you just go out there next couple of years and you just, you know, bust your butt. And if you're still tired, you're tired, right? There's always time to work. So I definitely think that, you know, without that backbone, this is hard. There's a lot that goes on. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's tricky. So I'm a firm believer in, you know, that support system. It's a big deal.
It is. And I want to give you a lot of credit watching your transition. Recently watched, and I don't watch much TV at all. I watched it on a flight, something on Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he talked about mountains to climb. You know, the first mountain he climbed and he dominated was bodybuilding. And, you know, he got to the top of the top. And then, you know, second milestone was acting in Hollywood, got to the top, and third ended up going into politics. But a lot of people after that first mountain, because you reach the highest mountain peak in professional sports. And there is a time, like you talked about, that I shout out to you for even bringing that to light, post, what did you call it? Depression,
Post-sports depression, yeah.
Depression, where, the back of that mountain slide is a slippery slope. And a lot of people don't have a second mountain to get to. No. You're already not only climbing your second mountain, you're killing it for, your first year in real estate.
Yeah.
And you have a second vehicle, and you're taking all of your skill sets that you earn, hard work and dedication and, teamwork from sports, and transitioning over. And that's why you're doing so well. So I want to give you a lot of credit on
appreciate that.
Making that transition. That's pretty awesome to see. And it hasn't been easy. And, during that transition, I'm sure, the household, it's good to have, your lady on your side.
It for sure is. It's always, and like we kind of touched on, it's all mindset, right? Everything's a scary transition, right? Even for you, like, granted, you might have 50 agents, but every agent you add, it's always it's a scary process, right? You don't know what that's going to bring. And I think that kind of having that too it is scary, right? Especially here, you're not on a salary, right? You got to go out and get it.
Yep.
And so, I think it's that constant, hey, you can go months without getting paid.
Yeah.
Whether you have deals going on or not, those could fall through, all the things that go on, but it's just that mindset. And I think that's big, especially in this field too, right? I think that's why the statistics of, 60% of agents quit after the first year, it's not easy, I think. And that's where I think, like I say, social media it can lie at times, right? If you look at social media on a realtor's page, it's easy.
Yeah.
You see someone closing deals, man, this guy makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
This is easy. Well, everyone gets a real estate license.
Yeah.
But then you do, and you're like, oh, whoa, like this isn't.
People aren't just lining up.
Exactly. And that I think that's a big thing, especially being in this field. And that's what kind of drove me to even want to do this, because, social media can lie, and I think it's right. Because you're never going to post if you and the wife are arguing, you're not going to post a video like, hey, man, look, me and Daisy are arguing, right? You know what I mean? And so, and I don't think it's purposely to be fake, right? But some things are meant to be out there, some aren't. But yeah, so we'll go a couple more minutes. Last section. What I like to do is let's get deep.
Yeah.
Right. So a couple questions I like to ask. So first one is kind of going back to mindset, right? So the biggest reason why most people don't take that leap of faith, I'm sure you would agree, is because people are afraid to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were 30 failures away from being where you wanted to, how fast would you do it?
As fast as possible.
Right.
I would fail forward. And that's a great question, because, like there's that Michael Jordan poster. I failed 9,000 shots. How many times the game was on the line and I missed that shot? Failed over and over again. And that's what makes me a winner.
Yeah.
And so I try to get it done as fast as I can. And that's a great point. Most people are afraid of failure. They're afraid of failure, or maybe outside validations, things of that nature. And as long as you have your head down and know you are good enough, you are worthy, you will actually get the win through time.
100%. I completely agree too. And it's something that's why I always tell people, I live by a motto, and it's just like, fuck it.
Love it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, well, what's like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? We cold call, we do all that. And it's just like, dude, fuck it. Like,
yeah.
If you're 30 fails away, like you never know, right? It's every winner was a loser at one point. They just took the L one more time and they're there, and I think that's my biggest thing. I always tell people, I'm like, dude, just do it. Like you'll be fine. Cause a couple of those, and I'm like, so, right. So, okay, we'll go hypothetical, right? If you're afraid to fail, but what if, like, what if you didn't? What if this is the
other side of that coin? That what if coin. Yeah.
That's a big thing too in coaching. That's what I tell my kids, right? Like a lot of kids are afraid to fail. I get it. Right. But I'm like, okay, now what if this is the at bat that turns your season around? What if this is the game that gets you an offer? What if, don't leave any what ifs, right? Don't leave the what if, like, just go do it. you're going to fail, you're going to fail, you're going to fail. I think that's why baseball is so awesome, because nothing really teaches you more about life than baseball. Like all you do is you literally fail. You fail for a living. Like who wants to sign up to fail 70% of the time and like be considered great?
That's a great point.
If you catch 3 out of 10 passes, you're terrible, right? If you shoot 30%, you're terrible. You know, you hit 300, you're pretty good. You're legit, right? You're in the Hall of Fame. So I think that's
a great point.
Yeah, that's why I love baseball. I think, you know, a lot of times too, that's why the transition can be easier, is because it's like, well, the transition to real estate, especially because you're going to fail a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, what about the wins, right? The wins are that's what you go for, right? But during the time of losing, it's when you learn. We don't really learn much winning. You know, it's just like, hey, I won, I got the deal done, you know, but every time you lose, you know, it's like, you know, like what could I have done to get better? You could actually feed off of it.
So it goes back to mindset. And I can even remember in the 5th grade, and I had the skills to pay the bills. I was actually one of 2 5th graders on varsity basketball, like point guard. I had skills, but there's, you know, 6th graders that were running the court. I actually probably should have played JV because I didn't really get much play time. But speaking of fear of failure, I remember last 2 minutes, they were ready to put me in.
Yeah.
And so Fort Washington Elementary School, the Patriot, Mr. Hales looked us down and goes, Scott, but let's go in.
Go time.
And I didn't go. And that's why I remember that today, because I was afraid and there was a fear of failure. And I can remember that so vividly, and it still haunts me. So I don't want to ever go back to that mindset of would've, could've, should've. And so therefore I take moments like that where I know I was afraid to fail. And I who knows, I could have hit the, you know, well, they were up by a game-winning 3-pointer or whatever. But the moral of the story is I still remember that this day. So that moments like that is, I don't want to ever feel like that anymore.
100%.
You know what I mean? And that's why I do remember that, because now I take action.
Yeah.
You know?
100%. Okay, so kind of leads to my next question. So if you were to walk home with kindergarten Scott today, what would you tell him?
Wow, that's a great question. Number one, I would tell him to always be appreciative and move off of gratitude. Just always be grateful. You know, I don't want him to be entitled and I want him to earn everything. I also want him to know part of life is struggle, and it's about the journey and not the destination. It's a little bit about both, but you know, you got to find happiness in the struggle.
Yep.
And you are good enough. Never let anyone tell you you're not. And just be an overall good person and leave this world a better place than you came into it with.
100%. That's kind of...
You hit me deep, so I mentioned some deep areas right there, you know?
No, yeah. So, yeah. That's kind of, I feel like that's what a lot of people would tell themselves, right? And I feel like if I were to go back, I'd say the biggest thing that I would tell myself is, you know, like, enjoy it. You know, I think it's hard, right? Because as kids, we're stubborn. And what do our parents always tell us? Like, enjoy being a kid. Well, we can't wait to be an adult, right?
Yeah. And
I think that's what makes it tricky, is as kids, we're stubborn. You know, if I could go back to myself, like, hey, look, like, enjoy being a kid. Yeah. You know, and I think that's something, if I had my biggest regret, was probably, it was all work. You know, work. You know, a lot of sacrifice, which obviously is good, right? Because I got to be in a position I was in. But at the same time, it's like you kind of miss out on the childhood stuff. And that was something I think if I could go back, I'd be like, hey, man, just enjoy being a kid.
Kobe Bryant talks about that. Yeah. You know, he used to park up at UCLA and just watch the kids and just try to see if he could get some normalcy back of, you know, enjoying it. Wow, that's pretty deep. I like it. I'd love to, you know, touch on that further down the line. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last question. What's your ultimate goal in life?
My ultimate goal is to leave a legacy for my family, for them to be proud of me and install morals, values, and have them become somebody in life. And ultimately, happiness, I'm always there, but I always know that life isn't always about happiness. We're not going to
100%.
always be in the state of happiness. So understand that, life has ups and downs, but it's about who you keep around, and it's the priceless things that matter.
100%. You kind of said, I think my biggest ultimate goal, I think happiness.
Love it.
I think it's something that, right, and there's different forms of happiness, right? Some people it's going to be money, some people it's going to be, whatever it may be, right? But I think that's something that even though we think we are, we never really are. And I think that, as I get older, all the kids are grown, it's just me and the wife. It's like, you know what, like happiness, I want to be able to say like, we did a good job.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think, like you said, legacy, I think, things like that. But I think the ultimate goal, and I think more people should have it, is just like, hey man, like at some point in time, like I truly just want to be happy.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that it is hard to come by, but it's just work, right?
Yeah.
You just got to work towards it. So
one more thing I wanted to add on that was fulfillment. Is fulfillment, because that's why I'm still growing. That's why you're growing. I mean, we've reached certain milestones in our lives, but I still feel like, we know our potential, and we know, and I have so much more to go. I have so much more I could help and give back to and be a part of the community with. And so I still feel like fulfillment to me is a bucket I want to fill up a little bit more.
100%.
And I remember one thing you told me in my office, and we were just talking numbers, and I was like, yeah, usually agents do 1 or 2 deals the first year, the average agents. I remember you looked at me around the eye and you're like, well, I'm not average. And you've proven that. And because you're not fulfilled with just average. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want to attain good to greatness.
Yeah.
And that's who I want to be around. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I want to thank you for
of course.
having me on here.
Of course.
Talking deep and
yeah,
we
no,
got a lot
100%.
to-
It's
more
all
conversations to have.
100%. Yeah, I think it's just all confidence, right? I'm not, I'm not a cocky guy. I'm not,
Not at all.
pretty humble dude, but I think it's just all, confidence. And I think that, and it's one of those things that I kind of check myself with too, is like, hey, you know what? I don't want to seem disrespectful either. And it's like, well, hey, I'm not average. I don't want to close 1 to 2. It's never to be disrespectful. I think it's just, I know how much I work and how hard I work.
Yeah.
And, I think that's where it's like, I can't say nothing wrong with being average, right? Because like I said, this is a hard job to do, but I think it's just knowing what you do behind the closed doors, when no one's watching.
Yeah.
Because I would say, like, I consider myself a loner, right? I think because a lot of times growing up too, whether sports, whatever it may be, I mean, every time I looked around, there's nobody really there, right? Like no one was really working out at 4:30 in the morning in high
Same with
school.
the calls. Sometimes you're the only one on the floor hitting it.
So I think that's why even now, like I'm just so used to being alone, and it's just from, hard work. And I think that's something that people have to understand too. Like, it's okay to be alone.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's best to be alone.
Yep. And there's a difference between alone and lonely.
100%.
And one thing I like to say is the difference between someone that's confident and someone that's cocky is where the heart lies.
Yep.
And good people, good-hearted people definitely could be confident. But yeah, I mean, if you're a jerk or all about money or something, then you're just a cocky a-hole.
Yeah.
Not over here. Yeah.
Well, that's it. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. I look forward to getting this one out there. Like I said, I obviously appreciate you being on. This one means
Jamal.
a lot.
Thank
It hits
you.
home.
Yeah.
Means a lot to the heart. Like I said, a role model growing up, known him forever, competed in everything we did, whether it's ping pong, taco eating competitions, everything. So I definitely couldn't be where I am today without Scott, and I definitely appreciate you being on here.
I appreciate you, Jamal.
Yeah,
thank you.
thank
Many
you.
more. Yeah.
Absolutely.